sometimes people get this image when they're not so familiar with Buddhism, that Buddhism is kind of anti-money or anti-finance. I just wanted to start off by saying, in my experience, Buddhism is not anti-money because money is life. Money is just inevitable. It's an inevitable thing we have to work with. But what Buddhism is anti-suffering.
Welcome back to the Artful Dollar podcast. I'm Ryan Roy, a tattoo artist, a financial coach, a philosopher and thinker extraordinaire. I don't know what the fuck I am. Still figuring that shit out, but I am here today to talk about Buddhism and money. Weird, right? Super weird conversation. Who would have thought? Normally when we think of Buddhism, we think of not money, right? We think of giving up all your belongings and going to live in a cave with nothing but a robe and a toothpick. But that is not actually the Buddhist perspective on money. And I want to share with you a Buddhist perspective on money from someone who knows very well the Buddhist perspective, but also our American capitalist perspective. So I have had a conversation with a good friend and a mentor. He's almost sort of my therapist. I speak with this guy every single week. He's my meditation teacher. His name is Scott Tusa. He has been studying Buddhism for over 20 years, and I actually invited him to come and speak at a live session in my course. The course is also called the Artful Dollar, where we have all sorts of tattooers and creative thinkers, painters. We had a real estate agent join us recently. We have people from all walks of life that are trying to get better with their money, but they don't want to talk to Chad from Fidelity in a blazer about money because, you know, Chad, he doesn't really know what your business is. You're a creative. I just spoke to someone the other day. She said every time she goes to a bank, they're like, so you sell drugs? Like, what do you do? And she's like, no, I'm a tattoo artist. And so this conversation comes directly from my course. You're kind of getting a little peek into that conversation. There are some questions that people ask. I share a little bit. Scott shares a little bit. And I just wanted to put this conversation out in the world because I thought you would really enjoy it and it would really give you some value. So if you're interested in Buddhism and money and the tie between spirituality and money, you're going to thoroughly enjoy this conversation. And with that, I'm going to let Scott take it away. So here is Scott Tusa.
Thanks, Ryan. And yeah, the feeling is mutual, brother. We share a lot of similar life experience. We both have a small daughter, and so it's a beautiful connection we have. So thanks so much for expressing that here, and also inviting me, to be a part of your community for the hour. So it's nice to meet all of you. I see some of you are tattooing. That's pretty cool. It's a first that I'm giving a Dharma talk while someone is tattooing. So I'm gonna definitely brag about that later. And so as Ryan said, he invited me here to just discuss some ideas of spirituality, money, life in the Buddhist tradition. I've been training in Tibetan Buddhism since I was 20. So about 23 years, I'm 43 now. And I've been teaching since around 2008. That was when I became a monk. I stopped being a monk in 2017. And, in that moment in 2017, I also re-entered the apaka capitalist, whatever we want to sort of how to refer to it, our challenging relationships with money. And that sort of reared into my life full steam because I was back in lay life again. As a monastic, I lived very simply as a monastic. Actually, money was still a part of my life as a monastic, but it wasn't a major part because I lived really simply and people funded through donations like my life. And I think I lived on less than $20,000 a year as a monk. So it wasn't, that much to fund. So I didn't have to relate to money as much as I do now, but I did have to relate to it. And this is kind of part of where I wanted to start the discussion. I want to share some Buddhist philosophy with you all in relation to life, money, finance, all that stuff. And just to kind of preface anything I say, my training and background is in Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist meditation. That doesn't mean that any of you in any way need to be Buddhist to get involved in some of what I'm going to talk about, or if these perspectives are interesting to you, they can be used in both a secular, non-religious, whatever way. Yeah, the Dalai Lama, who I was ordained by in 2008, he said, Buddhism, he splits it into three categories. We have a Buddhist science, which is just sort of like the observation of the universe and conventional reality. then we have Buddhist philosophy, and then we have Buddhist religion. And he said anyone can involve the first two, Buddhist science and Buddhist psychology and philosophy, without practicing religion. And I like that model because it allows us to both respect the traditions these come from and to understand how we could use in our life in whatever beliefs we currently have. So I always start off talks like that with new groups. And so, I think it's interesting when we talk about Buddhism and money, because a lot of people think of Buddhism as this simple religion. The Buddha was a monk who made his clothes out of the rags that were available, and mostly in like cemeteries. So cemeteries at the time of the Buddha in India, they weren't like our cemeteries. They weren't like clean and neat, with a well-kept grass, more like a park. They were kind of like scary places where bodies were just thrown, unless you were rich. The body was just thrown, and then, wild animals would kind of like have at it. And so the clothes were just strewn about too. So a tradition of monastics or mendicants in India at the time, not just in Buddhism, but any of the Indic traditions, was to take the clothes and out of patches of those make one's robes or sort of meditation garb, right? And so that's what the Buddha did. And so a lot of people kind of have that image in their mind, and they have that image of the monastic. But actually, Buddhism is not just for monastics. It actually has a whole tradition and whole sets of practices and ways of working with one's life as a householder, someone with kids, or someone with holding down a full-time job, or being a king or president or whatever, head of a business, or, you all run businesses. So it's applicable. So I just want to point that out. So, sometimes people get this image when they're not so familiar with Buddhism, that Buddhism is kind of anti-money or anti-finance. I just wanted to start off by saying, in my experience, Buddhism is not anti-money, because money is life. Money is just inevitable. It's an inevitable thing we have to work with. But what Buddhism is anti-suffering, right? So Buddhism is not anti-money, but it's anti-suffering. And so what the philosophies and practices and any psychology we're going to talk about today are for is understanding our human condition, understanding our human experience, including our relationship to finances and money. I've had my own kind of squirrely relationship with finances. I mostly kind of like collapse around money because most of my life, because I just want to avoid it. To me, it's like, it's not spiritual. It brings out the worst in me often. And I spent a lot of my life just avoiding it. And so I became a monk to practice the Dharma more. But there was this added benefit that I didn't have to, engage with money. And so I see that as it was kind of a cop-out on my part. And now I'm having to revisit my relationship to money because I have a family. And, as a meditation teacher, I charge money because I need to support my life. And how to do that in an ethical way, how to do that in a way that is aligned with the Dharma. For me, ethics don't just matter in religion, they matter in life. Because when we're unethical, we suffer more. When we don't have a healthy relationship to money, attachment, greed, aversion, we not only suffer, we remain confused, and we constantly circle in forms of confusion, wondering what's going wrong, why am I unhappy, why is this, why is something up one day and down one day, as opposed to understanding a structure and a basis for creating like a sustainable happiness. Now, unfortunately, life is just like that, as all you know. It's like, sometimes we have money, sometimes we don't, sometimes we're struggling, sometimes we're not. I'm guessing a lot of you are here because Ryan's helping you to work with those struggles, right? Which is great. In a sense, we also have to understand our mind in relationship to what money brings out in us. So I kind of wanted to focus on that. And then I wanted to focus on some Buddhist principles that we can bring in, or at least reflect on, if you want to, of how to relate to money and finances. There's a quote I want to read here. I don't know if I agree completely with this whole quote, but I liked it. The quote goes, "Money brings people together. On the other hand, money is also the place where passion, aggression, and ignorance are brought together." I would argue like money brings people together, and it also brings people apart, right? It also can bring friction and fighting, the haves and the have-nots, all of that. But I think what he's implying here, this is a quote from a Buddhist teacher named Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. He's saying, in a sense, money is inevitable. It's a part of human life. Whether we're trading shells, and we're exchanging shells as a form of currency, gold, I don't know, like an animal skin in a tribal society, or ones and zeros in a bank account that is in a fractional reserve system that doesn't actually exist. Don't get me started there. But, whatever we're doing, it's all an agreement. It's all in a consensus. So it brings us together because we have to deal with it. But on the other hand, like I was kind of briefly explaining in my life and my struggle with money, is it brings out what we call afflictive emotions in Buddhism and the psychology of Buddhism. Mainly these afflictive emotions are related to too much attachment. That we're not talking about like healthy attachment, like a mother and daughter. We're talking about like greasy attachment, where we're hooked into something and we can't get enough of it, and we're thinking about it all the time, and we're stressing about it, or we lost it and we're destitute and depressed. That he's using the word passion here, but we use often the word attachment or clinging. And then aggression. I mean, so much aggression is caught up in the pursuit of money. Just look at what's happening right now with bank collapses around the world. This is because of greed and aggression, or passion and aggression. And then, of course, ignorance, which is the main afflictive emotion from a Buddhist perspective. Instead of ignorance, I use the word bewilderment or confusion, and sometimes misperception. Because for me, my struggles with money are often because of a misperception, because I get caught up in my greed and aggression with it. So from a Buddhist perspective, the main way to work with a healthy sense of money, or a holistic, healthy way of working with money, would be actually to work with the afflictive emotions. Buddhism always goes to the disease, to the sickness, so to speak. And so what the Buddha pointed out is like, none of us are actually inherently sick. I think this is something we inherit from, no offense to anyone in a Judeo-Christian tradition, but modern Judeo-Christian traditions, they generally frame sin and virtue. And, that's all good if you want to follow that. In Buddhism, we don't frame it as sin and virtue. We frame it as, we're either caught in an afflictive emotion, or we're connected more to our basic nature, which we would say is free and open, free of greed, free of attachment, free of aggression, free of ignorance. The goal of meditation is to understand our relationship to the afflictive emotions. And obviously our afflictive emotions get inflamed in relation to objects, our relationships, our work situations, money. So often I find work, sex in relation to, relationships, passion, all of that department, and money to be the primary drivers where we can become liberated through them if we understand our misperceptions, if we understand how to work with our afflictive emotions in them, or they can kind of inflame our afflictive emotions. And in Buddhism, none of that is personal. It's not like you or me or anyone is a bad person for being aggressive. It just means we got confused. It means we got confused and we're either harming ourselves or another person. Or in the case of our conversation today, we're harming our relationship with money. We're not able to relate with money in a healthy way. So much of this for me is connected to our root fears, right? I'm sure Ryan talks about this a lot. Our root fears, like, do we have enough? Are we going to have enough? What if I don't get enough clients? I'm also freelance, as I think most tattooers are. What if I don't have enough clients? What if suddenly like my clients leave me, or whatever, I do something wrong, or all kinds of fears can come up. Someone working in a company, all of a sudden they can just get fired for no reason or laid off. That's happening more and more now, right? Because the economy's a little bit in trouble, at least in the United States. So fear plays into this, because when we're afraid, when our root fear is being triggered, we're at risk of falling under the power of our aggression, attachment, and ignorance or misperception. So in a way, I would say the way we relate to money, whether that's in a more healthy way or we're struggling with that relationship, we have to look at other areas of our life as well. So my perspective, at least in my life, is the way I relate to money is often the way I'm relating to life. Am I able to surrender and flow with the ups and downs of life? Or am I stuck in a pattern of fear? Am I stuck in a pattern of being triggered by my afflictive emotions, right? Which I would say for me, money is probably top 3 of what triggers my afflictive emotions the most. In Buddhism, we have a lot of ways to describe like a path then. People argue about this a little bit. They say, well, is Buddhism a religion or not? I usually say yes and no. Yeah, it has aspects that we could say are religious, but it's based in a philosophy or a path for understanding the mind. That's really the essence of it. The point of Buddhism is never to become a believer. And so what the point is that the Buddha had an idea of like, hey, here's a path. Here's some things you can work with in your life to understand your afflictive emotions that are mind-based and to get out of them, to find freedom. within them or from them. So the primary focus is on understanding our relationship to things, whether that be money, relationship, our own thoughts, our own emotions, and then having a more skillful path, more skillful ways to work with that. So there's hundreds of different teachings in Buddhism on how to do this. There's not like one way. But as I was reflecting and reading a bit, I thought to introduce something called the 6 paramitas. Now, this is a very big topic, so I'm just going to kind of barely touch it here. But I thought it would be applicable as a path towards working with money, finances in our life, and it's specifically afflictive emotions, fear, greed, all of that, right? That pop up for us. Paramita is a Sanskrit word, and paramita means to go beyond, something that's transcendent. And this is where it's a little bit of a rabbit hole I don't want to go too much into today, but I'll say a little bit. Going beyond means going beyond our own dualism. It means going beyond our own relationship to subject and object, that there is kind of something out there that's separate from our mind. So like I said, it goes a little into the weeds, it goes a little in the rabbit hole. This is where advanced Buddhism goes into understanding reality, investigating, what actually is reality. And so the paramitas are based on some investigation into that. And then there's 6 of them. There's kind of 6 that we train in based on that wisdom. Yeah, the wisdom gone beyond, or the wisdom of non-duality in Buddhism. And so the 6 are, I'll just name them, and then we'll start talking about them. So the 6 are generosity, patience, ethics, perseverance, meditation or meditative awareness. And then the 6th is that wisdom. And we can add the word transcendental to each of these. So it's not just generosity, like I see a homeless guy, I'm going to give him $1. That's great. But what we're talking about here is transcendental generosity, where we don't see a separation between us and the other person, or the act of generosity. Transcendental patience, transcendental ethics, transcendental perseverance, transcendental meditation, not the TM, I'm not talking about that, and transcendental wisdom, right? So what makes this all transcendental? View, the 6th one, the view of wisdom, that nothing exists in the way it appears, including money. I mean, money is a great example. I don't want to say anything about you. Like I already said, all of my afflictive emotions get inflamed around money: fear, attachment, aggression, ignorance of like, how do I get it? Is it sustainable? The business I built, like all of that. So what that's showing me right away is that money itself is in relation to something that actually doesn't exist in the way it appears. Just think about money for a second. This is just an example of wisdom a little bit. This principle of emptiness, or Buddhist wisdom. Where does money exist? I mean, it's even easier nowadays because it doesn't exist. It exists in a computer, a ledger, basically, that's attributing a certain amount of money to you in the bank, savings, or Bitcoin is a great example, right? Again, it's just a ledger system attributing a certain amount of Satoshis to you. Let's take gold or a bill. It's just a consensus, an agreement in society that we all agree on that this thing, this dollar bill in the United States, that's where I'm from, is going to be worth this, right? And that has nothing to do with reality at all. It's just literally an agreement created by someone that, we all are either born into, or at some point humans had to agree on. And that changes, right? As we can see. Is the US dollar worth $1? No, hell no. It's inflated. I live in Colombia. Venezuela, they have a 1,300% inflation. Yeah, right. Their dollar went to I don't know. I was like worth millions of pesos to buy milk. So, anyways, we can see money doesn't truly exist. Now, does it exist? Of course, we have to function with it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It does exist. We have to work with it. We have to earn it. We have to spend it wisely. All of that stuff. But when we look at it, it's also an illusion. So this is what the 6th paramita is pointing to. This is really deep end Buddhism, right? So don't worry if it's like, what the fuck is he talking about? Just let it go. But it's important because the other paramitas are in relation to this. That's why I have to talk about it. So the paramita of generosity means we're generous from a form of selflessness. We're generous from a form where we're not just seeing the world is about me. The world is interconnected. It's interdependent. Because just like money, everything is made of parts. Everything's interdependent on other factors. It's not this thing in and of itself. So essentially, we're talking about remedying that confusion, misperception, or ignorance. And then we practice generosity from that place. We practice patience, ethics, perseverance, meditation. So I'll go through these just piece by piece. But I've given 6-week courses on these paramitas. So I just want to be clear, they're big topics. So we look at generosity. I mean, all of us have a relationship to this in the sense of like when someone is generous with us, when they're giving, when they're caring. And I don't just mean generous with finances, generous with time, generous with words, generous with kindness, generous with, you all tattoo people. Probably you tattoo new people. I don't know. My first tattoo, I was scared. I was like, is this going to fucking hurt? Like, what's going to happen here, And the tattoo, actually, my first tattoo was done in some guy's house and it sucks. So I'm not going to talk about that tattoo, but let's talk about the second tattoo I got. The second one I got, the guy was really kind, and he just really like stable, steady, and don't worry, man, it's no big deal. Like, like just kind of helping me to feel more calm, whatever he said at that moment. That's a form of generosity, right? Just using our words in a kind way, helping people to work with fear. So generosity with money it's so interrelated because how we act with our money, and I'm not just talking about giving to others. I mean, just even generosity towards ourselves. I'm quite a frugal person. So I can be like kind of ungenerous to myself, right? In the sense of like, no, I got to save it. I can't buy this, $500 thing. I gotta wait. And also with others, I struggle, but I've had to learn having a family now, having a daughter where my money's not mine anymore, right? So I think of it like that. Everything I earn is not mine. It's for a community. So this is also a way to connect with generosity. So I'm saying this because we have to often look back at our own life, not in a judgmental way, not in like, I'm such a dirtbag because I'm not generous. Don't do that. It's pointless. There's no point in going to shame. But it is useful to look back and see, well, how am I? Do I tend to be stingy with people? Do I tend to be really giving? Do I tend to be like really giving with others, but I like hold back with myself? So anyways, just an invitation to understanding generosity in relationship, understanding money and generosity in relationship. The same with patience. Patience here applies because I don't know about you, building a business, having sustainable, healthy money is definitely a process of patience, right? When we're in a rush, I don't trust quick money, actually, personally. I think it's fine. It's not like that's a bad thing. But I think having sustainable, healthy money, it's a relationship. It's an attitude. It's not like, do I have a bank with $500,000 in it or not? That's not my goal, right? So applying patience here, it's connected to the generosity. Also, it's connected to ethics. There's a lot of ways to talk about ethics, but I'll just talk about it as friendship, which connects back to patience and generosity. Ethics is about friendship. It's about treating others around us, and obviously in relation to money, treating them as friends. I mean, we don't have to be friends with them, but they're another human being who deserves happiness, just like we do. So we have to think of it like that. We have to open our mind with a generous, caring attitude to others. I mean, if someone's an asshole to us, that's a different story. We can have a boundary and say, okay, bye, see ya, have a good life. But that doesn't mean we have to close our generosity to them, right? Closing a door because we need a healthy boundary is different than closing generosity. So ethics here just relates to embodying friendship with ourselves and others in relation to healthy money. Same with perseverance. Obviously, we need perseverance. We need to follow things through. We need a structure. We need some kind of plan. And then meditation. Meditation's a big topic, and I'm not going to go so much into it here, but meditation in Buddhism is primarily about the cultivation of awareness, the cultivation of this quality of mind that can bear witness more objectively to our thoughts, our emotions, our experiences, all of what's happening around us. Now, you can see everything I've been talking about so far, it's actually not possible without meditation. There's a lot of forms of meditation out there. You can find anything, nowadays. In Buddhism, we're quite specific. Meditation has to be the cultivation of awareness because awareness allows us to see what is causing suffering and what's going to liberate us from suffering. In this case, how do we work with generosity, patience, ethics, and perseverance in relation to money and finances? And how do we relate to wisdom, or this aspect of seeing through, but at the same time being responsible with our financial life, right? So meditation is kind of key. For me, none of this happens without meditation. My relationship to money, I'm only able to see more of it through awareness. Now, awareness is not like a religious or spiritual quality. We're all born with it. So through this course, I imagine you're gaining a lot more awareness just because, you're exploring your relationship to your businesses. You're exploring your relationship to healthy money with Ryan, right? You're exploring, I'm correct, Ryan. Yeah, I don't want to assume what you're doing. So that in itself is a process of awareness. Now with meditation, we can deepen that awareness where we can understand the causes of suffering even more, and we can reduce and eliminate those causes even more. That's really the whole point. So I kind of wanted to open up with Ryan, make sure we have time for that. I'll just mention briefly one other thing I wanted to talk about today, this idea of wealth and richness, because I think it's a confusing topic. And I think in our societies today in the Western world, it's centered around money, which I think is a mistake. It leaves us only with one option, which is materialism. And materialism in and of itself is a dead end, just complete dead end. Socially, emotionally, spiritually, I would say even physically, it's a dead end because materialism it doesn't go on. It's not infinite. It has a peak and then it starts to go down, right? Now, where we are in the Western world in that peak, I don't know. Some of us argue we're already kind of off the peak and we're going down. Some would say we have more to go. I have no idea. But the premise is, because it's built on cause and effect, materialism, is it will go up and down. Something that goes up has to come down. So we have to start thinking of, in my opinion, we have to start thinking about richness in a different way. So we use this word in Sanskrit, we call it ratna. And ratna is more an energy. It's more a vibe than anything else. And ratna, you can translate as richness, but it's not just the richness of money. It's the richness of generosity. I would say richness starts with our own self-worth, which is in very short supply these days, right? So in my work, I coach people a lot on just worth, because it's been something I've struggled with a lot. We could say richness as just worthiness, that we're worthy of being okay in our own skin, in our own bodies, with our minds, with our emotions. We're okay with the ups and downs. And most of us are not okay. So there's even a richness to develop there, right? I already said it, but a richness as spaciousness and generosity in our relationships. Have you ever met people, and maybe some of you are like this, who are just they're so full of relationships, like positive relationships. Everyone in their life treasures them because the person is showing up for those other people every day in a way that's not controlling, in a way that's not bossy, in a way that's not trying to get something out of the person. They're just there and it's steady, right? Maybe you have someone like that in your life. They're rare, I often find. But that's a form of richness. It's a form of generosity, just being rich, and I would say we can cultivate that. I'm not naturally like that, so I have to cultivate it, right? And then I'll say a few more. Richness as the energy and dedication we bring to our daily tasks, right? This is a whole deep topic of when I see some of you tattooing. What's the richness you're bringing to your tattoo work right now? I hope your client isn't listening. Are you just trying to get it done? Are you involved? Are you kind of in it? Are you relating to the person? Are you kind of in that creative space? And there's richness there. I see someone nodding their head. Yeah, there's so much richness there, right? So what does that look like applied to other areas of your life?
Hey, all you artful listeners, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for giving a listen to the podcast. I hope that it's bringing some value to you in your life. That's really why I started this podcast. And if you're getting something useful or valuable out of it, I just want to invite you to go rate and review this podcast. It really helps me out. And it also helps other people find this podcast so that they can get some value out of it. They can feel more free around money and just get some wisdom and some knowledge that we're trying to share on here. So again, I'm not really asking anything else of you other than to just leave a review and rating for this podcast. It really helps me out and helps other people find us. So thanks and enjoy the show.
And then just lastly, and then I'll open it up. And this is specifically for meditators. Richness as spaciousness within our thoughts and emotions. That's the richness we grow with these, primarily those fifth and sixth paramitas, meditation and wisdom. We go with this richness in relation to our thoughts and emotions where we're not beholden to them. We're not controlled by them, but we were not getting rid of them either. I think a lot of people also mistake Buddhism that we're trying to become robots through it. No, that would be really, really boring and pointless. So the point is not to get rid of our emotions. The point is that we are not thrown around by them anymore, and we can use them to enrich our life, to enrich our relationships. So I just will stop there. I shared a lot of ideas that could probably be a longer talk, but yeah, we can get into it now. Anything that maybe Ryan, you just want to start it off, kick it off, and
that kind of. Thank you so much. I didn't know what to expect, but
It exceeded my expectations. So thank you. And like so many things, like you and I, we'll talk about the same thing over and over again. We'll even say it like almost the same way over and over, but you'll hear it differently each time. And just in hearing you talk about, the point of meditation being to cultivate spaciousness in your thoughts and your feelings, just kind of resonated a little bit more in that, in hearing it this time. And we were talking about, I had this day on Sunday with my daughter. It's not that there wasn't things that could have been on my mind. Often I'll obsess about my business or what, things I need to do, the emails and and it's not that the stuff like wasn't there at all. It's that there was a lot of, I had this amazing day with my daughter, and it was just like, I was so present because there was spaciousness in the thoughts and feelings. That's what I was present to. And I'm not always present to that. And it sometimes is fleeting. And my meditation practice is also waxing and waning at times. But if I want more moments of spaciousness in my thoughts, my feelings, in my life, very few things, if anything at all, helps me accomplish that, besides, in the way that meditation helps me accomplish that. So, and that richness. And I was talking in the previous class, I don't think he's here right now, but someone in the course was just sharing so generously, and he's shared very generously before. And I just acknowledged him and saying that, he really has this wealth in his being, and it has nothing, real wealth has nothing to do with your bank account. It just doesn't. There's extraordinarily wealthy people with no money in the bank, and there's extraordinarily wealthy people with lots of money in the bank. And there's lots of money in the bank and has, no wealth at all. I love that perspective on it. So
yeah, it really brings into question the sense of like what is really poverty, and in Buddhism, we would describe a poverty mentality is the worst kind of poverty. Yeah. And I think poverty gets reimagined through human history. Like not too long ago, poverty was having like, a bunch of chickens and cows and sheep and stuff, right? Like that, the opposite, richness, like physical wealth. What was that? Having, and like 8 kids to run your farm, like that was wealth.
Right. And now, wealth, some people think, having a large social media following, that's like one version of wealth these days that is so, attention is the new currency. I remember a long time ago, and then I don't know if anyone listened to the first season. I think it was the first season of that Books Closed podcast with Andrew Stortz. It's like a tattooer podcast. I think it was the first season, maybe second, but he interviewed this guy that got super insta famous and did very simple, minimal tattoos. And I remember the time when it was a new phenomenon in tattooing, that people who did very minimal, simple tattoos would become like famous for it. And they interviewed this guy, and, he said it, first of all, it was never his intention to like become so well known for doing something so simple. And he kind of felt weird about it. And he just talked about how the more, and I'm getting to the point which you can apply this to money or friends or anything, which is the more he got, the more lacking he felt. Like the more followers, the more attention he was getting, the more insufficient he felt. Like, oh, I only have 50,000 followers. But I'm probably hoping to get to 100,000, and like without realizing it, like how a year ago he would have been glad just to have 5,000 followers, and it's interesting, the perspective shift in relationship to wealth. I guess that's maybe the point I'm trying to make. Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah. I think I'm really interested in the question more than the answer these days. Like with myself, I run on fear mostly around money. I run on not enoughness. That's kind of my primary relationship to it. And so I'm starting to explore, well, what are other areas of my life that I can develop wealth in? Like, I remember this one guy, Charles Essenstein, some of you might know who he is. He was kind of writing on something around like social currency, and not social media currency, social currency in like the communities we have around us.
Like the social credit score system in China. No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. More like if shit really hits the fan and, our systems and societies start to fall apart from what they are as we know them today. He's like, all your guns and ammo isn't going to help you that much. What's going to help is like having like friends with a farm, like a community, like people who you put energy into and generosity, and they're going to be generous back to you when it counts. Like that's a whole nother thing we never think about. because we're all in our isolated bubbles, like trying to like build our bank accounts, whole nother thing to reflect on, right?
What's an area of your life, Scott, that you feel very wealthy in?
Dharma.
Dharma.
So I've focused most of my energy since I was, like I said, since I was 21, really since I was 28, but 2021 is when I started in the Buddha Dharma. I was a recording engineer during that time and musician, so I was kind of building a business there. And then at 28, I became a monk. But either way, like my focus was always like Dharma, even though I love music and I love being in the music business, still my focus was Dharma. And so to me, I feel so much wealth there because I've had incredible teachers who have shared generously their wisdom over the years and have nurtured me as a practitioner and as a student of theirs. And the Dharma itself, just practicing the path, has nurtured me, has given me so much in relation to how to work more skillfully with my emotions and thoughts.
I want to probe you a little bit. So if your relationship with money is based heavily on fear, what is your relationship with Dharma based on?
It was based on fear at some point.
Okay.
But it's not anymore. Yeah, it's not anymore.
Because I would imagine it'd be hard to have a wealthy relationship with Dharma and have a fear-based perspective of it, Or
this is kind of what I was saying. I don't know if I agree, because I think we often kind of compartmentalize our life. So we might have like a really healthy relationship with something, but we haven't ported that over. That's kind of how I see it.
That's what I'm getting at too, is like I can have very wealthy, healthy relationships in one area of my life and be fucking poor and broke in this other area of my life.
Exactly.
And I haven't transferred it over. And I often ask myself, okay, who am I being in this area of life that actually feels like connected and grounded and fruitful and rewarding? And who am I being in this other area? I think in the area of Dharma, I think you're nothing but generous. I know in the area of money, if I'm bringing a fear, worry-based sense of being to that, which I do from time to time. It's not that I don't ever do it, but I recognize it. I bring that awareness, recognize it. And I just simply remind myself, I simply can't afford this. This is expensive to bring this fear-based thought process into the equation here. Let me allow it to be. Let me not resist it either, because then I just end up getting stuck. And then, we had a conversation about being a while ago, and, I was saying who are you being when you're tattooing? And someone said, I'm being bold and professional. And I said, okay, cool. Who are you being around money? He said, I'm being boyish and immature. And I was like, oh yeah, how would it be if you were being boyish and immature around tattooing? It wouldn't go very well, So yeah, just sort of looking at, can you bring your way of being around Dharma to money? And what would that even look like if you were able to do it?
Yeah, totally. As you were talking, I was thinking of the sense of how we nurture something or don't nurture something is what we're getting out of it. So in a sense, it's sort of moving from fear to a very healthy sense of spiritual, let's just call it spiritual path in my life. That took a lot of time, that took 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of components of that. So I'll have to go and think about it. But definitely I can say it's because I nurtured it consistently on a regular basis and put time and practice into it. So I think it's the same with money. It's sort of first is understanding a problem. My fear-based relationship to money is a problem. I have to recognize that. Diagnose it. And then I think it's the sense of nurturing another kind of relationship to it, which is hard because sometimes we don't know. The Buddhist path is different because the Buddha prescribed a path, whether we think it's true or not, he prescribed something. With money, as you know, Ryan, it's so convoluted and confusing.
Scott, I have this course. You should do it. It's called the Artful Dollar. It's got a path. And
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But I mean, there's a reason you created that is because we don't have a lot of good examples in the world right now.
Yeah, I certainly didn't for most of my life. I was just blindly just hoping it kind of works out,
Just getting back to your question, I think it's what I was saying, nurturing a different relationship to money, working with fear around it, and developing structures and consistency around more healthy relationships.
Something we were talking about in the previous course, and I want to open it up too to hear if anyone else wants to chime in. Anyway, we were talking about bringing a sense of inquisitiveness and curiosity to areas where we're upset or frustrated. And I think it's so much that curiosity, you have a inquisitive curiosity around the Dharma, and you've invested that curious energy into it, and you have been returned with so much wealth in that area. And, I'm not saying I'm putting my finger right on the button, but I feel like I'm pointing at the button as like this curiosity, bringing that to the area of life where you're feeling insufficient, poor, restrained, restricted. There's something to that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally. I think that inquisitiveness for me also, it has a spirit of experimentation, which is important because like when something's not working, we can go the route of, getting even more fearful and stressful about it, right? We can go the route of greed and manipulation. Some people go that route, the aggressive route, trying to manipulate others, trick others, fool others into giving them money or whatever. Or we can do the hard work of experimentation and just trying and seeing what works for us. But that was kind of another point I want to make in our conversation, Ryan, which is like, for me, money also has to work in an ethical way. It also has to work in a way where I'm not only relating to it with less fear, but it has to connect with my path. It has to, we call it right livelihood in Buddhism. And right livelihood, often it refers to like how we make the money. Like, are we an arms dealer? That would technically be considered like not right livelihood because it's harming others through the arms that we're selling or drugs or whatever. But I think it goes deeper than that because it goes to our mentality of like, how are we aligned with what we do? So anyways, I just wanted to say that because there's so many components for me. It's not just the fear. It's kind of like I can get a path to actually making the money. That's not hard to do, especially when an economy is strong. But for me, that's not the most important part. It has to be aligned with these other things: ethics, generosity, patience.
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
That's the hard part. Yeah. My approach of like experimentation, consistency, not getting down on myself when I'm like, oh, this didn't work, or maybe I need to persevere and see it through. Like lots of different avenues we can take, or learning from someone like you. Like there's all kinds of ways we can take. Right?
I love to hear if anyone's just present to anything resonating with you, any nugget that you took away from the conversation, or a question that you have for Scott.
Scott, I wanted to know, what are the pillars of your life that allow you to stay focused on your Dharma so that, like you're saying, there's like a way you're trying to walk, but how do you know if you're staying in integrity with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. This is tricky because I have a big allergy to like religious dogma. So it's real tricky for me, but Buddhism has a prescription. It's like, it's there, just like the 10 commandments. It's like, don't kill, don't steal, etc. And so part of it is related to that, but I think that's more of a superficial answer. But I could just say like in one way, in the beginning of my Dharma practice, there was just like this relationship where, I don't know, let me hear what this person has to say. In this case, like the Buddha, right? And my teachers who were physically alive. What do they have to say? And then I think over time, I had to develop a more personal relationship to that because I don't work so well with somebody just saying, don't do that. I'm kind of like, I have to experiment and burn my finger and then be like, oh, okay, I should do that. You know what I mean? So often my pillars now, they're around awareness, because awareness is this quality that I've been trying to cultivate for 20 years of meditation because it served me the best. Sure, like I've studied a lot of Dharma, like technical things and all kinds of philosophy, but what served me best is just my own mind, investing in my own mind, and which is a quality we all have, this quality of awareness that can bear witness in a non-judgmental way more and more. And so I invest in that as a pillar because through that I experiment. And as Ryan was saying, like I try to stay inquisitive through awareness about myself, about another person, about something going on in the world, about an emotion I'm having, about a thought. And I learn that way. I function more on a sense of, I'm a musician, I'm a drummer primarily. And I studied a lot of West African, Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Cuban music, which is all based in call and response. And also I played a lot of jazz when I was younger. And so all that music from the African diaspora is based on call and response. So a lot of my relationship to ethics now and this, what you brought up is related to call and response. Like I'm listening. I fail in this all the time, by the way. I'm not like perfect at this, right? But I'm trying to listen for not just like obvious responses from the world. Like if I'm aggressive with someone, they're aggressive back. I'm trying to listen for subtler responses, like what's going on with my partner when something's coming up for her. Is there something in relation to our home together that is causing that? Is there some way I can respond to help her? It's hard work, because often what I hear, the call, so to speak, is like sometimes I don't want to respond to it, or it's painful to respond to, or it's proving something I want wrong, or not wrong, but like that something I want is not in alignment with what someone else wants. So I guess that would be my answer. I kind of try to listen from awareness and introspection and questions and inquisitiveness to the sense of call and response.
Thank you. Also, though, like, so you were talking about your awareness. Is it compassionate awareness versus critical awareness, where you look at something and you don't judge it? Or is it more critical, where you're looking at it to judge it in order to maybe right the way you're living, or to like find a different way of living from that awareness?
A little bit of both. So like the awareness, the meditative awareness I'm talking about, in Buddhism, we describe it more as a sense of watchfulness. So it's the quality of mind that isn't conceptual. And we all have it, but usually like we're not recognizing it. Most people who don't, if we don't meditate, we don't recognize it. So meditation is to recognize that part of the mind and then grow our relationship to it. And that there's not much critical thought in that. It's just sort of, we grow a pervasive awareness that can know on a non-conceptual level, or let's say like a less conceptual level. That's probably more accurate. So sometimes I'm using that, and then sometimes I'm using more critical, let's just call it like reasoning, which I think we can have really healthy forms of that, because for me, that happens in a healthy way through open questions. I mean, sometimes I'm critical from aggression or passion or attachment, which isn't healthy, right? But when I can stay critical from a perspective of reasoning or logic or just investigation, it's like an open question. With some things, I don't make quick decisions because I want to survey it, kind of like, someone on a battlefield up on the ridge kind of watching. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there's kind of two I use. One is from thought, that's more critical and reasoning based, and then one is not using thought so much, just this quality of awareness where I can bear witness and we get some insight into something that way. But it's not like an insight of like, oh, I've decided on this, through thought.
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Kwame. Great questions, man.
There's a question Kevin asks, what's your meditation process and what are you thinking about, Scott?
Thinking about like in meditation, or thinking about right now? Or
I don't know.
Okay. The word meditation, in my opinion, now I'm just going to be a little...
He says during meditation is what he's saying.
During meditation. Okay. I'm going to just spout a little bit of my opinion. Meditation in the modern world basically is meaningless, because meditation itself doesn't mean anything anymore, because people can just use the word meditation and then do whatever they want, right? In Buddhism, we're a little bit more specific with what meditation is. So I'm not saying like one is better than the other. It's just choice. It's sort of consequences. What results do we want to get out of our spiritual work? So in Buddhism, we have more or less like 2 or 3 kinds of meditation. We have meditation where, based on Kwame's question, we're recognizing that aware quality of mind, which is innate to the human mind and brain, and we're stabilizing that in the present moment. We call that meditative awareness, or in Sanskrit, we call it shamatha. So that's one type. That's, mindfulness meditation, all of that. It's cherry picked from that. If you've done some apps or mindfulness stuff, you can be like, oh, that sounds like what I did. So that's just kind of what we call meditative awareness practice. Then we have insight practice, which involves both critical thought and non-conceptual direct insight meditation. And insight meditation is more connected to that 6th paramita of wisdom, where we're trying to penetrate into an insight into the nature of something, whether that be a thought, an emotion, a phenomenon like a desk around, a desk or table around us. And we're trying to develop a healthier relationship to that because we're able to see it more clearly. And to answer your question, Kevin, that can come through reasoning, like I was saying with Kwame's question. If I just absolutely hate this fucking desk in front of me, it's awful, it's terrible, and it's causing me so much pain, and I can't do anything about it because it's, my wife loves it or something. I can analyze it. I can reason, well, where is the part of the desk that is absolutely terrible? Is it in the leg of the desk? Well, no. Is it in the color? Okay, maybe. Or is it in the shape? Maybe. But which part of the desk? So I might do some critical analysis to actually clearly see the basis. This kind of fixed sense of a desk doesn't exist because it's based on parts. If I like one part and hate the other, what is it? Do I like the desk or I don't like it? So this kind of critical thinking, we then undermine our misperception or ignorance. We can see this around social issues in the world too. A lot of problems in social issues, it's just ignorance around misperception, where we're stuck in a belief and we haven't questioned that belief. So that we call analytical meditation, where we're questioning beliefs, including Buddhist beliefs. Then we have non-analytical, where we're looking directly through awareness at the nature of something. That's a little more advanced. So yeah, all of that. And then of course, all this is done from an intention of love, compassion, and altruism. It's because of that intention that the practice moves us in a relational way. As we open our wisdom, that's in relationship to the others around us, right? It's not just isolated. So sorry if that's kind of too much.
No, I think it's a great answer. And I'll say that when I first reached out to you, I was just doing some version of meditative awareness. I used the Headspace app for a while, and I did do the TM thing for a little bit, but I was looking for something that had a little bit more of a intention, structure, guidance to it, not necessarily like in a guided meditation sense, but some parameters or skeleton or path, that I could utilize. And so that was why I reached out to Scott versus just sort of, again, wandering blindly on my own, trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Did that answer your question, Kevin? Was that clear enough? By the way, I apologize. I'm a little wound up. I'm closer to my coffee this morning, so my I'm speaking a little faster and more intensely. I had a strong Colombian coffee this morning.
I know.
If you catch me at night, I'm more chill vibe.
Well, I don't know how you'd be more chill than you've been, because I feel like you've been actually pretty chill, and I'm glad we got a little pep in your step too. So, we're pretty much at time. I don't know if there's any other last minute questions. Obviously, when I do post the recording of this, I'll just post a link with Scott's website if you're interested in seeing anything else about him and want to reach out to Scott. Obviously, he'd be more than happy to chat with you. Maybe love to have you back sometime, Scott, for sure. That was super cool.
Anytime, man. It's beautiful to meet some of your family, because often you and I are just one-to-one, so it's nice to do.
I talk about all these people and what I'm doing, but now you get to be a part of it too. So I'm really happy to invite you in. Super cool. Awesome.
Thank
all
you,
right,
man.
everyone. Well, that's it for our week. I'm always like, kind of signing off. I'm like, oh, cool. I'll see you all next week. But I think about you all like throughout the whole weekend, and you're in my thoughts. I'm holding space to clear out that which is in the way of allowing the miraculous to arise in your life. And I'm excited to see you next week as we continue this journey. So anyway, have a wonderful weekend. Be well, everyone. Again, thanks, Scott. And I will.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the show. Again, I just want to prompt that if you got some value out of this conversation, please go and leave us a rating and a review on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you saw this podcast. It really helps me out, and it really helps other people to find this podcast. I want more people to have these types of conversations around money so that we can all be more free and at ease and abundant and able to create the lives that we really want to live. So please share this and rate and review. Appreciate it. Thanks.